Cam talking to us earlier. Now, Sir Keir Starmer, Volodymyr Zelensky, Emmanuel Macron and Friedrich Merz agreed to coordinate with partners and allies in the coming days, including at the Johannesburg G20 summit, on a plan to end the war.
There are fears that the US president's boycott of the summit will overshadow the meeting of world leaders in Johannesburg. GB News political editor Chris Hope sat down with Sir Keir Starmer at the summit last night.
This important interruption is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Protect your money and your identity. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code here to get ExpressVPN right now and save up to 73% on annual plans today. Right. Let's get back into it.
Prime Minister, thank you for joining us today on GB News.
Not at all.
Bad news for those concerned about household energy bills going up by 0.2% fractionally next year, £3 annually. They're heading in the wrong direction. Bad news for the cost of living crisis. Why don't you allow more oil and gas licences in the North Sea to bring bills down, give us more cheaper oil and gas?
Well, I'm very aware energy bills are too high. And if there's one issue, I think, for your viewers and for families and communities across the country, above all else, is the cost of living. And that's why, in the long term, renewables is the way forward. That will give us security and lower bills. In the meantime, it falls to government to provide support. Last year, we put in a discount of £150 on bills for 3 million households. I'm glad that we're able to extend that this winter to 6 million households to put that support in. But we must do other things as well to bear down on the cost of living. Yesterday, I was announcing the further rollout of free breakfast clubs, which is very important for parents and carers. We've also got the capping of prescription charges, the capping of bus fares, free school meals, free childcare. All these measures are important in their own right, but they're all important together because I'm very, very clear about the cost of living being the number one priority for the government because it's the number one issue for so many people across the country.
Every time you're online, your money and your identity are at risk. Scams now make up nearly 40% of all crime in the UK. That's thousands of attacks every single day. In Britain, someone has their identity stolen every 2 minutes, leaving victims with wrecked finances and years of stress. The threat is real, and you could be next. ExpressVPN is your shield against criminals. It locks down your devices, hiding your personal information and financial details from hackers, scammers, and anyone else looking to exploit you. So whether you're checking your bank, shopping, or just browsing, ExpressVPN makes you invisible to prying eyes trying to steal your money and your identity. ExpressVPN shields your data with military-grade AES 256 encryption. That's the same standard trusted by the US government to guard classified information. This is the highest level of online security you can get. So don't wait for disaster. Secure up to 14 devices at once and get powerful password protection. Real support is available 24/7 because cybercrime never sleeps. Save up to 73% on annual plans today. Every moment you hesitate is another moment you're exposed. Protect your money and protect your identity. Get ExpressVPN right now.
Well, elsewhere in politics, there's a new poll out today. Weirdly, disturbingly for the Tories, it's an internal poll about how they'd do if there was a general election called now. They'd be down to 14 seats, apparently.
1-4.
1-4.
Exactly, that is staggering. That is if a general election were called now. This is according to the Telegraph. Some Tory insiders think the party is in danger of being consigned to the history books. The poll has Reform winning a 46-seat majority.
Theo Usherwood, the political commentator, back with us again. I mean, this is beyond catastrophic for the Conservatives.
Yeah, the Conservatives couldn't do anything with 14 seats. We saw what happened to the Liberal Democrats when, after 2015, they were reduced to single digits in terms of the number of seats they had in the House of Commons, and they found themselves unable to make any headway at all. And this is, for the Tories, of course, the drop is much more significant. This is the oldest, it's the most successful political party in British history. In fact, it probably, in terms of international history as well, I mean, it has been incredibly successful, but now it faces a crisis, not particularly necessarily of its own making, but a crisis that it's very difficult to see how it comes back. If there was an election tomorrow, it goes down to 14 seats according to this poll. And yes, it is a poll. It is just a snapshot of how people feel. But the road back for the Conservative Party, not just in terms of who leads the party, but in terms of the brand of the party, what the Conservative Party stands for, it would take more than one general election, perhaps 3 or 4 general elections. We're talking, up to a generation for this party to find its feet again. And I think it's, for those within the party now, they're going to be looking at this data and they're going to be thinking to themselves, and the 121 MPs or so that they have will be looking to themselves and thinking, OK, yes, we appreciate that Kemi Badenoch has done very well at PMQ. She gave a very good speech, as Duncan Barks was saying earlier, at the Conservative Party conference, but it's not cutting through with the public. It's not making a difference.
So Duncan was also saying, maybe it's time to call themselves new Tories or new Conservatives or whatever, just like New Labour. New Labour, calling it, rebranding it New Labour. I know it was also Tony Blair at the top. It was a different situation, etc., etc. But a new leader, new Conservatives. Would that help, or is it just obviously it's got reform is in there in a big time.
I think the problem is for Kemi Badenoch is that she's taken her time. And obviously she's dealing with a fractured party, to go away and have a policy discussion about what the Conservative stands for. But Nigel Farage and Reform haven't stood still. They've capitalised on that. I've spoken to Tory councillors. I was actually speaking to somebody who then messaged me on LinkedIn to say, well, actually, I've defected to Reform now. But when they were going out for the Conservatives, they're knocking on the door and saying, hi, I'm your local Conservative councillor. And they were saying, and people were looking back at them going, what do you stand for? And they'd had nothing to say because nothing had been agreed. And therefore, they'd already really made the decision to switch to Reform.
Right, so it's actually about policies.
They need to come up,
they need to come out with an actual policy, because that was the problem right at the beginning, is Kevin Badenoch, every time anybody said, what do you stand for? And it was all...
We're still working it out.
We're still working it out, felt like flannel.
But they're also occupying... they're trying to occupy under Kemi Badenoch and Mel Stride as the Shadow Chancellor. And I've got some sympathy with this, the responsible party. We're not the populists of Reform or Nigel Farage. But that isn't, I was listening to Keir Starmer's interview with, Chris. People are struggling. People are struggling to get by. They don't want to hear, well, you've just got to suffer a bit more. You've just got to put up with the tough economic situation.
This is the problem when you're battling populism. Yeah. People like populism because, oddly enough, it's popular.
Yeah, and Farage has almost created himself now so much political space and so much headroom. This puts him on 348 seats with a 46-seat majority, that he can even start to talk about going back and taking the tough decisions around, say, the triple lock on pensions, and saying, well, hang on a moment, can we actually afford this if we want to make some other decisions potentially around, lifting the 2-child cap on benefits for child benefits. So he's created himself the headroom where he can actually almost then usurp the Tories as being the responsible party by taking tough decisions around the triple lock, which costs us tens of billions of pounds each year.
Kemi Badenoch's not going to give up, right?
No, but she might be booted.
She might be booted, but the problem is, she was very good at Tory party conference, and the big policy she came out with, the stamp duty issue, right? Hugely popular.
Yeah.
It's a really, really popular policy.
Yeah.
And yet, even that isn't having the impact.
It's not cutting through, and it's very difficult, for the Conservatives to put themselves into the conversation about, where this country is going. And I think part of the problem that they have now is we've almost crossed the Rubicon, especially since the local elections, where the public recognise that this is now a 2-horse race between Keir Starmer and Nigel Farage, or whoever replaces Keir Starmer at the next election, Labour and Reform. And therefore, it's very difficult. I was looking at some of the headlines coming out of the Conservative Party conference and just thinking, you're not going to be able to even do this because nobody is thinking for a moment that Kemi Badenoch is going to be Prime Minister.
But it's interesting, isn't it? Because if you look back at the history of the Labour Party, huge periods of time, decades, when people would look at the Labour Party and go, you're not electable. And who actually in the Tory party at the moment could replace Kemi Badenoch and actually make such a difference that people would suddenly feel that it was rejuvenate.
I thought what was, people have often talked about Boris Johnson, but he got done on the Boris. It's a fairly hopeless situation, is my answer. Boris Johnson, got done on the Boris wave, and then we saw what came out of the COVID inquiry. So it seems like his goose has been cooked. There's no way back for Boris Johnson. The obvious one, I think, is Robert Jenrick. I think he's the one who's made the most. He's
making a splash, and he is somebody who.
But
people
ultimately, I
recognise,
think there's going to have to be at some point a merger between the two. But I think it's going to happen with the Tories being the weaker, the parties that have taken over.
Do they even need to when they're doing that badly? I mean, people like Robert Jenrick, who are proving to be quite popular, they could just defect, couldn't they?
Yeah, and I think you raise a fair point. I think it's almost now in the Conservatives' interests to try and find something where they're not completely wiped out.
All right, Theo, thank you very much indeed. We'll see you later.